Hi, everybody. It's really a lot of fun to be here, and I have an agenda I'd like to accomplish. I would like to cause you to think about a question that you'd like to ask me after I've been done talking for a while. The favor is you can ask me any question you want, but if you could, ask me a question to which I know the answer. That'll work out really well for all of us. Over the years, since I've been doing this every Tuesday thing, I always say I'm at Kensington every Tuesday except for the ones that I'm not. I've had the opportunity to interact and visit with some really fun, interesting, sometimes people in a tough spot, sometimes people who just wanted some business advice or, whatever. And I always try to start out with saying, so what do you want to talk about? And I've used that approach because of the variety of stuff that I've done in my life. So some of you in here know that among a variety of other things I've done in my life, I was a college mascot when I was in school. And I had the glory and honor of using what's called a soft costume. Instead of these great big heads, I was a tumbler. So I had to have an outfit that allowed me to move around. And I planted lots of really interesting memories in people's minds during those few years that I did that, in terms of falling off of the goalpost at a football game, landing in the middle of my back. And because I'd done so much of that kind of stuff, people thought I'd done it on purpose. Whereas in reality, I bruised my ribs and had to be helped off the field by the cheerleaders. But everybody had a good laugh. And I really believe that having the ability to laugh in any given situation or circumstance goes a long way towards softening life. So I graduated, shortly thereafter got married, probably been married a little bit longer than most of you in this room. We did 58 very recently. We adopted a couple of kids out of foster care. So we have that life experience. Well, we have the pleasure now of being grandparents, and that's a lot of fun. And they range in age from 8 to 22. So there's a lot that's going on there. And part of what I'd like to accomplish today is to give you some information that I would love for you to tell other people about. I was in the university world for many years. I worked at 4 different universities as an administrator, a professor, a researcher. Most of my time I spent at Oakland University. And then I'd made the decision when I was in my early 50s that I wanted to go out and do my own thing. So I started my own company, solo practitioner, doing organizational development, consultations of a variety of different types. I also had an adjunct professorship at Michigan State's Medical School, where I taught the recognition and treatment of stress-related disorders. I've traveled extensively in terms of my consulting stuff. Probably one of the most fun jobs that I had, and I still do it a little bit, is sports psychology. And that's a lot of fun. My specialty was professional golfers, so I got to travel all over the place doing that. Now, you're getting a feel for why I say, what do you want to talk about? Well, today what I want to talk about is how your brain really works. Because I think that we don't do as good a job in educating ourselves to how the brain actually does what the brain does. And the first thing that I want to make sure that we have some sense of comfort with and some sense of understanding is that I know that you're talking to yourself. And it's okay, because for some reason, that's the way God designed our brains. We're constantly talking to ourselves. We're talking to ourselves when we're awake, and we're talking to ourselves when we're asleep. When we're awake, we're mostly talking in words. When we're asleep, we're mostly talking in images and pictures. And that's why those dreams can be so incredibly weird. And yes, I used to do dream interpretation, when I was doing psychoanalytic work. So that's always kind of fun, too. You can get away with making things up because people don't really know. So that works out really well. But I know that up here, I'm going to be talking, and you're going to be talking to yourself at least twice as fast as I'm talking to you. And the real challenge in any communication, whether it's between two people or whether it's in a group setting, is the fact that from time to time, and remember, God designed it, so it's got to be okay. From time to time, you're going to find something more interesting to talk to yourself about than what I'm talking about. And when that happens, you're going to do what I refer to as go somewhere else. I don't know where you're going to go. I don't know how long you're going to be gone. But while you're there, enjoy it. Have fun with it. One of the best stress treatment tools that I know is to pick places that you really like and really identify with and go there on a regular basis. For some of you, you're going to be in Hawaii. Others of you, you're going to be in, who knows, Traverse City, whatever. But if you will regularly recognize the power of your imagination and recognize the power of the fact that you can choose what you're talking to yourself about. What I know about the brain is many of us believe that we don't really have much control over the brain. And the reality is, with a lot of practice, you do have a lot of control over it. And you can use it in ways that it was designed to be used. And hopefully, you'll spread that around. Talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors. Those of you who have kids and grandkids, help them to understand that this amazing thing called the brain, it's complicated. It can be difficult at times, but it's something in which you have quite a bit of opportunity to advance and control. Does that make sense? So that's the basic frame. Have a good time talking to yourselves, and I'll keep talking. And if I stop, and you look, probably means I told a joke, and I'm hoping you'll laugh. Okay. To understand ourselves, now there are all kinds of different methods and systems to better understand ourselves, and there are things like the Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, personanalysis, strengths finders. It goes on and on and on. And I highly recommend that you take advantage of some of those things, because I think that God intends for us to understand ourselves. I think he intends for us to know more about ourselves, because my bias, I don't think we can truly understand God unless we start by understanding ourselves and taking the time and the effort, the energy, to listen to our inner voices, to listen to people who have influence in our lives, and to take advantage of these other kinds of things. And then, go out and talk to people, There's some tricky parts to it, and one of the tricky parts to it is something that's called confirmation bias. And confirmation bias is one of the things that I think that we all have to work the hardest. And I think most prejudice and bias comes from confirmation bias. And if we can understand that our brain likes to talk about what it likes to talk about, and when we look at any given circumstance or situation, I mean, there's at least one person in this room who clearly thinks that Ohio State is superior to the University of Michigan. That's an example of confirmation bias. And it's almost impossible to always be aware of what our biases are. But if you look at any given conflict or any situation you're trying to get through yourself, understanding that there's probably some confirmation bias going on from yourself and from another person. Every once in a while I'll say, does that make sense? And that's not just a speaker's nervous tick. That really is, does that make sense to you? Does it? Okay, good. So I want to talk a little bit about this understanding yourself from the perspective of, I actually did my dissertation on the Myers-Briggs a long, long time ago. So I have a confirmation bias where I think that is an absolutely remarkable tool. But there are some things that have come out from the Myers-Briggs. And if you haven't taken it, I recommend that you take it. And if you want an interpretation, come in and see me on a Tuesday, and I'll work through it with you and give you some clarifying ideas or tips or whatever. But the two core elements that I want to talk about today as it relates to specifically the Myers-Briggs is, excuse me, the vocabulary is changing a little bit. So we try to keep up on the vocabulary of the Myers-Briggs. But that's not really what I want to talk about today. What I want to talk about is extroversion and introversion. Because extroversion and introversion are not just being noisy or being quiet. The primary issue of understanding extroversion and introversion is that's how we refuel the brain. That's how we, along with food and exercise and all that other stuff, each of us is going to have a preference in terms of restoring our psychological, emotional energy, either through an extroverted process, and literally translated, extrovert means to turn out. And those are the folks who naturally need other people, who naturally need to be talking to other people, who naturally need to be in the marketplace, as it were. Okay? And roughly half the people in the world, as far as the research can tell right now, have a preference for extroversion. The other half of the population have a preference for introversion. And literally translated, introversion means to turn in. That is the need that if you have a preference for introversion, that means that you need to control time and space in a fashion where you can go away and get your energies charged back up. Make sense? So if you look at your friends, if you look at, for those of you who are parents, and for some of us who happen to be grandparents, if we look at our children and understand from observing them, spending time with them, talking with them, whether they have a preference for introversion or extroversion, then you're going to be able to give them the opportunity to learn how to take advantage of those kinds of things. Make sense? The other thing from the world of the Myers-Briggs that I want to talk about, and this is this is one that I wish everybody understood, and I'm actually going to put some little things up here on the boards as we go along. In the Myers-Briggs, I don't want to get too technical on it, but basically there's 16 different personality types. There are 4 different personality temperaments, and those things, I'm going to set this down. And that's how we get 16 types. ENTP, ISTJ, all of those kinds of things. But one of those processes is your dominant process. It's kind of like for those of us who are right-handed, it's our right-handed. It's the one that we naturally turn to in any given circumstance. One of those processes is referred to as the inferior or least preferred process. And knowing your inferior or least preferred process is there, and knowing that each of us has within us, in essence, a family that sometimes get along and sometimes don't get along. In Romans 12, it talks about each of us having gifts differing. And that's kind of where the woman that wrote most of the stuff about the Myers-Briggs got her idea of explaining personality type, is to understand that each one of us has this panoply of gifts that are within us and figuring it out and how to use it. One of those is called the least preferred, and that's the rebellious little character that the Freudians misidentified as the id. But it's kind of the part that can cause difficulty within the family. Everybody has one of those in their family, and we all carry one of those around inside of us. Now, it also is really good, but it's also because where a lot of our creativity comes from and a lot of our sexual identity comes from is that particular inferior process. What is a much better term than inferior is least preferred, because it's really strong. So it's not inferior, it's just least preferred. And that's what can cause us to go into obviously I was not an elementary school teacher because my handwriting is horrible, but that causes us to go into the grip. You know those times and moments when you're out of sorts? There's something that's really bugging you, and you're more likely, to be owly and growly. You're in the grip. And I use the term grip, not my term, but I use the term grip because I like the fact that it implies that it's really got a hold of you. easy to go into. It's almost unconscious when we go into it, but it holds on really, really tightly. Making sense so far? Okay, good. So everybody goes into the grip. When you go into the grocery store and there's somebody, who cuts in line in front of you, or someone who is so distracted that they don't even notice that they just, knocked over, the shelves or whatever, it's a good probability that they are in the grip. And what we tend to do with our confirmation bias is we judge them. Okay? But what I'm encouraging you to do is, instead of judging them, to understand them. To understand them. And to be able to let go of a lot of unnecessary conflict by recognizing when you're in the grip. I used to do a lot of premarital counseling, and I still do some marital therapy now and again, but this is one of the core principles in human relationships, is knowing when you're in the grip. Also knowing that there are primary and secondary triggers that cause you to go into the grip. And I'm going to give you a little acronym that I borrowed from somewhere else and then added something to it, but the acronym is HALTS. The primary reason that we go into the grip, interestingly enough, is hunger. Hunger. Blood sugar. Simple blood sugar. I like watching young moms, and you'll see these incredibly talented mothers of like 4-year-old, 5-year-olds. No high-skilled mom ever goes any place with their 4-year-old without a snack, right? Okay? Because that blood sugar, whoop, and all of a sudden you've got, a very upset, angry, whatever child. But every one of these has two components to it. Hunger, yeah, it's about food, but it's about the right kind of food. You see well-meaning but inept moms of 4-year-olds, and they carry candy. That's not a good idea, is it? The ones who carry the Cheerios and the banana slices and those kinds of things. Those are the folks who intuitively, or because they learned it, understand that hunger has two components. It's not just any kind of food, it's the right food. There's a book that was out quite a few years ago that called Eat Right, for your blood type, which talks about those aspects and figures like that. So hunger. The second one is anger. Anger is often what people think that they're going to see whenever somebody's in the grip. But that might not be a primary trigger for you. You may be able to control your anger without too much difficulty, or your resentment, or whatever. But there are people who have to take anger management classes and do all those other kinds of things because they don't really understand that the grip uses anger as a pathway to gain control over you. So when you find yourself getting angry, I would encourage you to say, wonder what's going on. What am I upset about? What's the real issue here? Relatively recently, although I found out it's been around longer than I thought it was, the book Unoffendable really speaks very, very clearly to the scriptural realities of what anger means. And I was raised in a tradition that believed in righteous anger. And Brad Hansen, the author of this particular book, Unoffendable, points out that you can't find that anywhere in the Bible other than God. But we as individuals, so anger can be a complicated, but it can also be a freeing thing when you understand. And I highly recommend listening to this book, Unoffendable. The guy's, I think in some ways he's a stand-up comic, but he's really, really good at what he does. And I would, if you haven't read it or listened to it, I'd highly recommend that you do. And the anger can be a pathway to understanding yourself, or it can be a pathway to losing control of yourself. So you can have a grip and be hunger, anger, and because God created us to be in relationships, lonely can be a major pathway to the grip. Now, what kind of relationship? How relationship works for you? Do you have what's sometimes referred to as male pattern friendships or female pattern friendships where guys get together and they do things, you know, and gals get together and talk about what the guys are doing? So lonely. Manage your loneliness. This is a huge one also, and this is tired. The other, I'm going to do one more thing on lonely. It's not just being in relationship. It's being in relationship with the right people. And I can't define the right people for you, but understanding that if you have a preference for introversion, then you're going to have a smaller cadre of people that you need to spend time with. One of my favorite introverts at one time told me that what she really loves to do is get together with another one of her friends, and they sit on opposite ends of the couch and read books. And for an extrovert, that's what? But for them, that's their definition of relationship, and they're gaining the benefit of getting their energies restored. Tired. Tired is huge. And again, it's two things. It's sleep. You know, there's lots of research out there trying to figure out, you know, what REM sleep means. But we clearly know that that's when the brain, the mind-body system, recharges and clears out the cobwebs and does all those kinds of things. So on average, we need between 7 and 9 hours of sleep where the REM can kind of come and go. So sleep is very, very important. In our culture, the biggest enemy to sleep is that thing we carry around in our pocket. Because that interferes, that blue light, you know, that attention, that, you know, so what we understand is that we should get away from any kind of that stimulation at least 45 minutes before we're going to be going to sleep. Make sense? Is it easy to do? No. It's very difficult to do, but at least, yeah, give it a shot. And then you'll probably find that you're less likely to go into the grip if you're getting good regular sleep that's based on the REM premise. Okay? The other thing about sleep is exercise. In order for the mind-body system to engage with the REM process, we need to exercise. We're designed to exercise. Can't tell you what that means exactly, you know, but that means moving around and doing things. Because if we don't exercise, we don't get the sleep that we need in the way that we need that sleep. Okay? Please pass it around. Talk to people. Let them know about this stuff. The last one here, the S, stands for spiritual isolation. Spiritual isolation. One of the more famous of the original psychoanalysts was a guy by the name of Carl Jung. And actually the Myers-Briggs comes out of his ideas and his theories. And one of the things that he said that has made a huge amount of difference in people's lives is that addictions of all forms are spiritual addictions. He himself was an agnostic, but he understood the power of spirituality. And for some people, it's hugging trees. For other people, you know, there's lots of ways to find where your spiritual contentment can reside for you. But understanding, and then he put a capstone on it, which I really like. He said, if you are not at least in the pursuit of a spiritual identity, by age 40, by definition, you will be neurotic. Wow. Well, what does neurotic mean? What neurotic means is that you're distorting reality. Psychotic means you're out of touch with reality. Neurotic means you're distorting reality, or reality is being distorted by somebody else and you're buying into it. Okay? So that's a very, very important piece of this understanding. What I want to do now is just, any quick questions on this, or slow questions, or? because this is kind of the backbone of what I really want to accomplish and achieve here today. But I do want to talk about attention. Attention, okay? Partial attention means partial value. And one of the biggest problems, that we're encountering, again, let's go back to the cell phone as the example. You go into any restaurant, you go into any mall, you go anywhere you go, and people are there and they're not interacting with each other. They're interacting with that thing they've got in their hand. And this has been a problem long before there was such a thing as, as a cell phone, because people need to understand that we're hardwired to grasp the concept that partial attention means partial value. Just think about that for a second. The times that you felt, that you were not being listened to. All the way back to the ancient Greece philosophers, they understood that we have a drive to be in relationship and we have a drive to be understood. One of my favorite books from quite a while back, the title actually sums up the book very nicely, and it says, "Please understand me." And if we're going to effectively understand another person, it starts from understanding ourselves, and we're going to recognize or understand that partial attention means partial value. Now, like I said, I did a lot of teaching on the recognition and treatment of stress-related diseases, and I came home, actually I had just given a lecture on it, and my wife, who's an amazing psychologist also, early childhood specialist who was an award-winning elementary school principal and did all kinds of stuff like that. It's taught me everything I know about child development. And I've talked to a lot of you people in this room about your kids, okay? And what I always try to remember to say is all I'm doing here is just channeling Kathy. So what we understand is that, here I am, this, fairly well-known stress management specialist. And I came home one day, and my wife says, "I learned the most amazing thing today about stress." And I'm thinking, you learned something about stress from somebody else? And she said, "Yeah, this guy came in and he was talking to all of us, and he said, stress makes you stupid." Wow. Forget all that other stuff. And recognize the psychological, spiritual, emotional opportunities that you have in your life to become stupid based on the way that you're handling and interpreting stress. I'd like to stop now and see if somebody has a question to which I know the answer. Yes.
With your introversion and extroversion, can you be more balanced or equally? Because I find that I've gained restoration from being with people, but then also being isolated by myself. But by nature, I would claim I'm an extrovert, but man, I really need some of that nobody else time.
Well, there's different opinions on this. Some people actually use the word ambivert, which I don't really buy into the concept of ambiversion, which means a balance between the two. What I believe is that we have a strength of preference from very clear to slight. So if I have a preference for extroversion, which I do, but it's slight, I don't need the amount of time with people, interacting with people, that somebody who has a very clear or strong. Okay. But what we're doing is we're recharging from the introversion extroversion thing, and it's almost as if we had a battery built in right here,
And that battery runs everything we do. And as that battery gets used more and more, the charge goes down, 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 down. But fortunately, not only do we have a battery, we also have a power cord, and it kind of sits right here, you know. And if my energy is going down, 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 you know, and I recognize, because I have a preference for extroversion, that I haven't been spending time with people, you know, I reflexively reach over here, pull out this cord, and look around the room and go, people. I need people. Where can I find people? And then I go and I plug into those people and I interact with them. And by the act of interacting with them, my energy level starts coming up, 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 until I get to the point where I am fully restored. If I have a preference for introversion, same process, but the difference is I've spent too much time with people. There's too much noise in my environment relationally. So what I do is I realize that my battery is plugged into those people and it's going down, down, down. So I unplug from those people, retreat, go away, control space and time, and then my energy level can come up, 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 and then I can have a more balanced. Much of what happens to us in terms of being overloaded by stress is we're not taking care of our battery. So if we take care of our battery. Now, the question that I usually would be followed up by, so I'm going to follow it up myself. Well, you know, I have a preference for extroversion, but I need my alone time. You know, I need to go for a run, you know, I need to disconnect from people. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But what's happened is that if you'll notice, if you have a preference for extroversion and you're plugged into people, that battery can get overcharged. Because there's two conditions to a battery. There's undercharged and overcharged that we need to maintain. So if your battery is getting overcharged and you have a preference for extroversion, you probably start getting a little twitchy, you know, and you kind of, you know, bouncing around or whatever. And you know that you have to unplug, you know, from the marketplace, as it were, and go off by yourself, and then the battery will kind of come down, down, down. The same thing is true with introverts. Get to the point where you've been alone by yourself, and then all of a sudden you start going, well, gee, I wonder what's going on over there, you know, or what's happening here. And then you can re-plug into that, but you're re-plugging into that to bring your battery down a little bit so you can have some balance there. Yes?
Chris. Chris. I'll say to Miss. Okay. Is it fair to say that whether you're an introvert or extrovert, there's still the need for belonging? And how would that? I mean, does that kind of overlay the battery analogy?
Did you say belonging?
Belonging, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not going to try to remember the scriptures off the top of my head, but just, you know, think on your own. How many places it talks about, you know, gathering together, you know, and the importance of having meaningful relationships. So, yeah, fellowship, belonging, membership is a crucial element in creating and maintaining mental health, as well as creating and maintaining spiritual health. Okay? We're all designed by our creator to be in relationship with him and with the others he's created. But we can have a preference for the others he's created, but we can't have a preference for a relationship with him. That just has to happen. Make sense? Any other questions?
When you recognize that you're in the midst of grip, how do you approach trying to pull yourself out of it? Would you like look at your halts and evaluate those, you know, starting at the top and going down to the bottom, or how can you pull yourself out of that?
The first thing is always breathing, because the more we get into a stress situation, the less oxygen we're taking in. And the brain is designed to have a cleansing breath. Do that for me. Breathe in. Notice what happened? It begins to change from the stress response to the relaxation response. And we're all designed, to do both. But if I'm going to be involved in, a 100-yard dash, I'm going to need to signal my brain to wake up. And the shallow, rapid breath is what signals my brain to wake up and get ready to go. But if I'm in a circumstance or a situation where, because of any of these or our individual triggers, I need to signal my reticular activator to. Then once I do that, then I can intellectually begin to process what's going on in the environment. And some people are what we call hot responders, and some people are what we call calm responders. Okay? The hot responders have a tremendous amount of value, but so do the calm responders. So we need kind of both people in our lives. This is a true story. My dad, he was an invalid, so I didn't get to spend as much time with him as I would have liked to, but he was a calm responder. And I literally, when I was in the 4th grade, a German Shepherd came up and bit me in the face. A German Shepherd had rabies. So he caught me right here and just raked it straight down. My dad, I get home, and he says, "Oh, well, I guess we better get you to the hospital." My mom. So, they figured out a way to get me to the hospital. We go in, and they do all the cleanups and the stitches and all that kind of stuff. I'm like 10 years old now, and my dad's sitting beside me. He said, something I want to share with you. That dog didn't mean to do that. That dog has a disease. And you're going to go through some pretty painful treatment, but that dog's going to get his head cut off. I'm not afraid of dogs, folks. Never have been. So that's just one example of a calm responder. Anybody else? All the way in the back.
Hello. I have been very much blessed with ADHD. I absolutely love that I have it, but the one thing that I can't stand is something that you touched on in the very beginning. My silence is not silent. And I have the inner commentary going at all times. And I want to try to start working on slowing that down so I can start hearing God more. What are some ways to practice that? Any tools of the trade, anything like that you can provide?
You have, if you're typical of most people who have that particular diagnosis, you also have an extraordinary ability to concentrate on something that really is meaningful to you. Other ways of categorizing that, is not an attention deficit, kind of a thing, as much as it is an attention intensity. So make sure that you find what it is. One of my grandchildren, it's creativity, and she controls what the folks call attention deficit, by getting involved in her art projects. And she's able to see things that nobody else can see. And the other thing that I've observed over time is the vast majority of people that I know who have this, they're more creative than most people are. So make sure that every single day you do something that you can recognize as you're being creative. and that will help, most likely. And then probably the most important part of it is meditation. And actually take a class, maybe you already have your own method or technique, but again, the peacefulness of slowing down, that restlessness is an issue of getting the reticular activator to call for the relaxation response instead of for the activity response. Okay? Sam?
Yeah, dude. Did you guys know that we had our own in-house Dos Equis guy? Like the most interesting man ever? Come on, man. That was awesome. Thank you so much. I do want to remind you guys that Jack is here every Tuesday except the Tuesdays that he's not. And if anyone would like to meet with Jack and he can ask you, what do you want to talk about? Email Debbie. Debbie, raise your hand. Email Debbie, okay? And she can hook you up with Jack. And we have a wealth of knowledge, experience, and just care all wrapped up in our own in-house Dos Equis guy. So make sure that you take advantage of that. This is such an awesome, awesome opportunity. Yeah. Traverse City as well. He can get on Zoom and Teams and all of that. So, Jack, thank you so much for sharing with us. Absolutely incredible. Yeah, that's it, man. I can't say anything better than that. So, thank you guys for being here. Get after it today.